Welcome to Spirit of the Midwest, a show featuring interviews and stories that expose the deep values and pride found in the heart of America. My name is Wesley Noble, and I'm here today with my co-host, CK Hicks.
And we're here with Chris Coyier, who does a great many things online. You might know him from CSS Tricks, or CodePen, or the Shop Talk Show, or writing, or speaking, or a great many things. Chris, you're kind of all over the place. Thanks so much for taking time with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It is a pleasure.
Yeah, and so one of the things that fascinates me just right off the bat is usually we try and ask people kind of where their roots come from, and you're very open about your Midwest roots, and I think most of us know kind of what you've done, some of the things you've achieved in your different websites and ventures, but I'm really curious to know where you came from and what brought you kind of to this point.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure that I wouldn't be on this show if I wasn't Midwestern some way like you fellas. So yeah, I'm Wisconsin. We're very much Midwestern, really. I guess it'd be kind of interesting. I wonder if like you guys are going to kind of define what the Midwest is on the show a little bit, because I think there's a little contention about where it starts and ends and how far south it goes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like you guys are right on you're pretty south for it. Is Arkansas still? Because Louisiana for sure, that's not the Midwest. That's just the South.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've talked a little bit about borders, and if you look at the maps on Wikipedia and other places, it's kind of up for interpretation. So I think we're looking just for kind of wherever you are currently, where are you from, what's the spirit of that region. So that's kind of what we're after.
Yeah. I'm sure. I think it's kind of an interesting subject. Like, Where is this place? I grew up in basically Madison, Wisconsin, a small town outside of Madison, Wisconsin, suburb, Verona. Yeah, I mean, it's the heart of the Midwest, you might say. Anyway, it was just Madison's the capital town of Wisconsin. It's the second biggest city there to Milwaukee, and I don't know. That's just where I grew up. It was we're firmly middle class, and went to school with I don't know, maybe a third farm kids, that kind of thing. And it was a lovely place to grow up, really. I kind of had, unlike most people, I feel like, in this entire country who kind of look back on their high school years as awful or traumatic or couldn't wait for it to get over or whatever. I kind of had the opposite high school experience. I liked it there. I remember being quite sad when it was over, because I was like, I don't know, I'm headed off to college, and I'm not looking forward to that. I think that will be fine, but I don't know, will it be as interesting? Will I have as many friends? I'll have to reestablish my coolness in a way.
Yeah.
Is that going to transfer to college? It seems highly likely that it won't. But yeah.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So you had a very favorable and memorable high school, whereas a lot of people, it seems like they look back and you're, like you said, they're kind of, oh, I'm so glad that's over with, or I didn't know what I was doing. And
I get that, because it can be, you have a stupid locker, like what if the person in your locker next to you hate for like some very legit reason, like they make fun of you or something, or they stink, or that's it. Your whole year you have to deal with that. There is no escape. As an adult, if there's somebody I don't like, cutting them out of my life is the easiest thing ever. I just don't call them anymore or whatever. Yep. Maybe if my neighbor is a bummer, but still there's some like walls in between us and stuff. It's not a big deal. But I can that's traumatic for a kid. Anyway, yeah. I just never had that. I was kind of a computer nerd, but then I played sports too, so I kind of transcended that boundary. And I don't know, I had like really kind of like cool parents that kind of let me do whatever I want. So I kind of, my house became like kind of a place where kids would hang out and stuff. And it just, nice. I kind of brought people together in a sense, and just kind of, wasn't a part of one clique. I was parts of lots of them, and it just felt good being there. And, speaking of the Midwest, we had cornfield parties, and there was cow tipping going on. It was a pretty authentic Midwest experience.
Oh, that's excellent. That's so good. I was creeping your website before this episode, kind of doing some research, and I looked at your timeline, which is really cool. It's a really cool idea to have kind of a timeline on your life on your website.
It's for my own, I can't remember that stuff.
Me too. That makes so much sense. But it looks like you grew up in Wisconsin, and then you moved Portland, Chicago, Tampa, Florida, then back to Wisconsin. So what brought you back? What drew you back?
Yeah, it's not as interesting a story as it might seem like. But yes, it was my great leaving of the Midwest happened kind of well after I was even graduated from college. It was kind of I better get out of here, otherwise I'm gonna be my whole life here, which doesn't feel bad. It just doesn't feel like what I want for myself, kind of. And I was in a transitional stage, but I was working on the web. I was working on a little design agency kind of thing already, and I was like, I know that I don't have to be sitting at this desk to do this. You know it, I know it. It's all email and stuff.
Right.
I can do this from anywhere. Okay, I won't be at one little client kickoff meeting. Big deal. I'm pretty sure y'all can handle it. So it's kind of like, you don't have any choice here. I'm going to leave and you can fire me or not, And
Nice.
I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it. I was just saying, I get a job somewhere else. But I like you guys and I'll keep working here if you want. They had never kind of considered it, but they let me do it because, why not? So I moved to Portland, Oregon, just because I had a buddy out there, and he's like, "Oh, you want to come live out here? Cool." I was like, "This is my chance. This is my big opportunity to do something cool." So I moved out to Portland, and I was there for a year and a half or so, and it was great. Loved that town. Worked remote. Worked on the web. That's kind of when I was starting CSS Tricks, and it was lots of fun. And then it just, not for hating Portland, I just had another opportunity come up in Chicago where my buddy's like, "My roommate's moving out. You want to live here for a while?" And I was like, "That sounds nice." I was a little homesick or whatever. So back to the Midwest for Chicago for another, I don't know, couple of years or something. And then didn't love Chicago. Nothing against Chicago. Just didn't, for various life circumstances, didn't fit particularly well. Got the job at Woofu, which was my big, I'm going to go work for a startup.
Right.
How cool is that? And I was a super fanboy of Woofu, and moved down to Florida, and that whole team was awesome. And some of my lifelong friends to this day were Woofu people. But I wasn't in Florida too long, a year and a half or 2 years before Woofu sold to SurveyMonkey, and that was in Palo Alto, California. So they're like, well, okay, here we go. We all moved out there, which was a good time. But I kind of knew by that time, enough years had gone by, that it's probably about time for me to go off on my own. So I did that, and then I was living in Palo Alto, paying Palo Alto bucks to live there. And I don't know, people's kind of tenure was ending at SurveyMonkey. Not that anybody disliked that job, but it was kind of like, we're all going to kind of move on. And
Right.
so people were leaving there, and I was like, there's no reason for us to stick around out here. And my buddy Tim moved to Bend, Oregon, and I was like, you know what? If people are leaving, I'm going to leave too. And I had some cities on my radar. I really like New Orleans. I was kind of thinking about moving there. I was pretty close to moving to Austin because that was a kind of cool town. I have friends there. But then I was like, I don't know. I have a lot of friends back from the Wisconsin days. I lived most of my life there. A lot of my friends are still there. I'm not going to move back to Madison. That feels a little too close to home. Maybe nothing against home, but like this, that feels like an end game scenario. So I moved to Milwaukee, which is a bigger town than Madison by far, and it still felt very new. And every time I came to Milwaukee, I had a good time. So I just was like, you know what, this is nice. It'll be nice to be close to family, and my money will go a little further and stuff like that. And so it wasn't, it's not an uninteresting story, but I just kind of just picked it and was like, I don't know, I'm sure it will be fine here.
Right.
Yeah.
And you like it?
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I'm looking out my window right now, Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, nice. That is my favorite place in the world. The North Shore. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you grow up in the center of the country. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and lived there for 24 years.
Wow.
And moved to Springfield about 5 years ago because I had some friends here who were starting some projects, and they're like, "Hey, you should come down here." And I was like, "Well, it's only 6 hours from home." And so I've lived in Omaha, Kansas City, and Springfield. Those are the three places that I've spent significant amount of time. But it's funny how, as you visit other places or you go elsewhere, and then you see the pace of life, and it's kind of fun and exciting. You see other things and you go, but I have this feeling, like I've talked to people who have grown up in Texas and then moved to New York or different places, and they always go, yeah, but I just kind of miss the pace and the simplicity and just the vibe of the life that is kind of flowing through everybody in these Midwest, the center of the country. And it's there's nothing wrong with the coast at all. We say this every episode. There's have nothing against any other part of the country, but there is something unique and interesting. There's a hardiness and a
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it. I get that. I don't know. There's just little stuff like when you walk into a bar, you just it feels comfortable. You just know kind of what the situation is going to be like in there. You just kind of know what the standard responses to questions are.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels a little different, where you just don't feel quite as at home, kind of anywhere else. When that stuff is a little more up in the air, you don't feel a part of it.
Yeah, I was living in Kansas City when the Royals were entering the World Series, and it was really great because Kansas City is about 2.5 million people, and the whole town turned blue. They were changing lights on buildings, and they were doing all this other. It felt like a really tiny town whose team had made good. But it's one of these major cities in the middle of the country, and you walk in somewhere and go Royals, and everybody goes yeah. It's just this hilarious interaction where everybody's kind of bonded together, and you can do that when, like you say, there's like a camaraderie that just comes with the territory. So there's
culture,
about it.
Really,
yeah.
and of course people feel more comfortable with people with shared experiences and stuff. You tend to marry somebody who's like you, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you bond with people who have a bunch of shared experiences. That's just kind of how culture works.
Yeah. Did you notice that very much when you were living on the coasts? The difference between Midwest culture and coastal cultures?
I did, and it's the same thing, just like you said. There's nothing wrong with it. I just didn't feel it. Never felt like home. And it was kind of fine. Especially living in Palo Alto, it's known for this perfect weather, and every second you walk outside, you're like, oh, this is so great. But is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. And then you're home, and it's just colder than anything outside. I came back last winter, which was just a disaster. I know this winter was rough for the East Coast people, but last winter in the Midwest was something else.
Yeah.
It was, but it felt good. It was my first winter. I've lived in the Midwest in a while, and I was like, yeah, I can handle this. No big deal. I was pretty done with it at the end, but.
What do you do when it's so cold? Snowboard, snowmobile?
I did take up skiing last year. It had been since high school when we skied around here. And you can ski in the Midwest, surprisingly. One of our local ski places is called Tyrol Basin, which I think is funny because it's you're skiing down into a hole. It doesn't look like that when you're there, but it's funny to name your ski mountain a basin. I enjoyed that, just picking it back up and trying to do something healthy in the winter-ish,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just do what everybody does. You stay inside a bunch,
Right. So one thing that's interesting as we've you've been talking about the kind of different places you've lived and the different things you've worked on, the different teams you've worked on, and obviously Wesley said, on your site here, your timeline, you have all these different events that have taken place, and you've worked with these different companies and launched these different companies. And so the common thread between a lot of it seems to be, like you say, when you were really young, you enjoyed bridging gaps between people, and you kind of brought people together. And you obviously have a gift for looking at a situation or even a problem and saying, well, what are ways that we could solve this, and how could we share these resources and things like that. And I have to believe that some of that comes from that kind of unspoken camaraderie that you grew up with, where you're just used to, if you see, your neighbor's trying to dig his car out of a ditch, of course I'm going to go help with that, and so do you think that has been a positive influence on the way that you look at just the people around you, as far as kind of helping share in their experiences, or even just realizing, hey, you know what? Why does this guy get ostracized because he's a part of that clique in high school or whatever else? Why don't we find ways to work together on this stuff? So I don't know. Does any of that ring true?
Yeah, it does. I haven't spent a ton of time thinking about it, so I'm not ready for my medium think piece on it all yet, But it's there probably is some truth to that. I don't know if it's necessarily that I'm from the Midwest, thus I thus I am more community oriented. I'm sure there's communities kind of everywhere, but for me personally, certainly, yeah, there's some recurring themes. I was like a club starting kind of person in college, even. Starting little groups and stuff here and there, and there's some sense of bringing people together for that. And I feel like I have some decent sense of empathy and sympathy towards people as a human being, and I think that's that's useful for that type of thing too. And it works in writing too. Like how can you teach somebody something? Well, you need to have a little empathy first, so you can understand where they might be now. You can understand what it was like to not understand this thing, and then write for them.
Yeah,
right? Like,
this is all you, Wesley.
Yeah, well, CSS Tricks, I mean, that's where it's at. It's a teaching platform, essentially, right?
Yeah, it's a little disjointed because it's just kind of there's more to it than a blog, but the blog is kind of the heart of it. That's what most people are familiar with and get found in search results and stuff. But there's forums there too, and screencasts, and there's some organized content. Like the Almanac is a section of CSS Tricks, which is just documentation of things like CSS selectors and CSS values and things like that. And that, so there's a lot of stuff there, but the bulk of it is writing in a certain style. It's writing in the you don't get this yet, but you're going to.
Right.
And it's not condescending. Like I've noticed that when I have gone there before, like it doesn't treat you like you're an idiot.
I hope so.
It's kind.
No, it really is. And I mean, obviously the site's been online for 8 years now, and I know I've been reading it for many of those, and the tone you just described, I don't know if I would have been able to put a finger on it, but the way you said it makes perfect sense, where you say you don't get this yet, but you will, and just kind of this leading you to a solution by way of example and explanation that is really, it's a very personal feeling. And it kind of, we can all go to the specs of the actual CSS docs and everything, and they're just not friendly to read, and they're hard to kind of mine through, especially if you're newer and you're going, I don't know what any of this says in these revisions. And then you go to a site like CSS Tricks and you see, so here's what we're trying to do, here's what here's what I know, and here's what we could do if we pool that and get to this result. And it's just so personal, and it demystifies a lot of kind of the red tape and all the white papers and everything. And I mean, all of that's there, and I really appreciate having that in-depth resource. But even just something simple like, hey, here's a way you could use, positioning on a CSS element, and it would make your life a lot better if you just did this on a regular basis. And we go, oh, whoa, and I know for a fact that, because I work at a web agency, I know for a fact that is taken into great consideration, as we're building frameworks and other things. So it's a really cool resource, and I think it's maybe even more farther reaching than you may ever know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, perhaps.
That's content strategy right there, which is just so cool. I mean, have you had any formal training in that, or like taught yourself?
Not so much, but at one point in the history of CSS Tricks, there was and I keep track of the version numbers of all this thing. There was version 10 of CSS Tricks, which was going to be a big one because I had just kind of quit SurveyMonkey, and I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I don't go to the poorhouse here. So how can I make some more money? Well, CSS Tricks is like there's all this stuff, people are reading the site or whatever. You attach some forums and comments to all that stuff, and you have a community. Yeah, and then and then a community and traffic and stuff. If you put some advertising in it, then you have a business. So CSS Tricks is a business too, and when I did V10, I was like, I did a Kickstarter for V10, and the idea of the Kickstarter was to help me turn CSS Tricks into more of a business. So that was kind of my plea, and so it was pledge money, and that part of it helped business, but that wasn't the point of it. It wasn't give me some money because that's how business works. It was The idea of V10 was help me turn this thing into a business, and not not because give me $20 and that's a business. That was unrelated kind of. It was kind of like, you help me and you'll get a t-shirt, and most importantly you'll get access to me redesigning this whole site with business in mind.
Exactly.
That was the idea. And part of that was, let's not do this, offhanded, in a stupid way. Let's plan. Let's do a lot of planning before this thing kicks off. Let's take a bunch of metrics. Let's talk to a bunch of smart people. Let's have certain goals in mind as we do it. And I did talk to a content strategist, Aaron Kissane, as part of that series. And you can still to this day that series is part of what is called the Lodge now on CSS Tricks, which is a paid access area of a ton of different learning videos. And that like, for example, I sat and talked with Erin for an hour after she had done a bunch of research in her whole content strategy, showdown. And then we talked about her how that all worked and what her findings were and that kind of thing. And that helped guide version 10 of CSS Tricks, which is, each iteration isn't from scratch. It's so her work, lives on to this day, because the new versions are just iterations. But yeah, I've thought a little bit about content strategy. Certainly not a master of it, but there's enough content on CSS Tricks to warrant that type of thinking for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess another kind of tertiary question to all of this is the implications of going full time with some of this stuff. You have in your timeline, you have the April 2013, you went full time with CodePen. So, I mean, it seems like, and we talked a little bit about this before the show started, where, you answer emails very quickly. You're very good about getting back to people. You're super, super active on the social networks and such. I'd be interested to know kind of your, and I think I can guess at the answer, but I'm curious to know what your sort of, like the work ethic that it takes to keep up kind of these full-time positions on multiple projects and then active contribution on other projects and still manage to answer emails in like an hour. So what have you found or what's been helpful for you as you've kind of just gone at this for a number of years to be incredibly you put out a lot of resources, but then also still manage to keep kind of the personal touch and get back to people and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually a somewhat common question, how do you do it all kind of thing. Lots of people get that question because, people tend to kind of measure themselves against other people's productivity, which probably isn't the healthiest habit, but it's probably a little inevitable at some point, Mm-hmm. I promise I employ no special tricks other than just work ethic, which is kind of a funny. Don't we get that for free in the Midwest? Yep. The people are. It's kind of a common. I'm not sure how true it is, but I like to think it is true that all around the country people like to hire Midwesterners because of our innate work ethic, which I love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just means that you work all day and don't complain about it, and you just kind of take it for granted that that's what you do. And I certainly do that. I do have some advantages over other, just based on stuff, unmarried, single dude. I'm a privileged white male, so that doesn't hurt. There's things that I can just that look like productivity that I do, there's just the fact that I can write a blog post and publish it and a whole bunch of people read it. It kind of looks like more or something than somebody else working all day that probably was a lot more productive for me, but their thing didn't get to go as public as the blog post I just wrote did, So just by nature of that, pretty much everything I do is public looks a lot more productive, even though it's probably about the same as amount of productive as anybody else. Well, there's no secret.
Well, it's kind of fun because, and I was kind of hoping that was the answer, because anytime you find somebody who's really prolific, whether it be in writing or podcasting or video production or anything, usually the answer is, well, I do it every day, and then after a long time, I have this stack of things that I've done, and there's really no mystery to it. It's just
that's
steady
very
work.
True.
And so, but you're right. That does. As much as I don't want to hold this over anybody's head who doesn't live in the Midwest or didn't grow up here, there's a work ethic to and a lot of it comes from those of us who grew up on farms and or had to wrestle with the elements on a regular basis. And you get used to, well, today we throw hay, so we're up before the sun, and when the sun goes down is when it's time to stop, and then we turn the lights on and we we keep going. And so you kind of get used to that kind of hardy mentality and the momentum. And it's just cool to see it expressed in the digital form, like you've done so well of just being so prolific in all the different things that you do, but it really being just such a simple, you just got to keep moving mentality in that. And that's I don't want to underplay that though, because that takes a lot of dedication and a lot of discipline too.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not there's no cheating either. It is still a bunch of work. But yeah, it's just, I have this, this is a good documentary. This is a good plug. It's called Home Movie, and it's some guy was making commercials for something like Home Depot or something, or Lowe's or something. And the idea for the commercials was to find people that live in super weird places and then go talk to them. And then, at the end, just at the end of the commercial, just be like, Home Depot has stuff even for this weird person. But I never actually saw the ads, but I got so much good footage from trying to get those ads, this is how I understand it, that he turned it into a whole documentary, and it's about and it documents 5 people that live in extremely weird places. Like there's people that decked out their whole cat just for their their whole house just for their 100 cats. There's people some hippies that bought a nuclear missile silo and live underground in it. There's an old woman who's a star, Japanese sitcom star who lives in a tree house in the most remote island of Hawaii. There's a couple more, but my favorite was this hillbilly southern, I guess it's not a hillbilly, lives on a swamp, whatever you call the version of a hillbilly that lives on a houseboat on the swamps in Louisiana.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And he was kind of like a philosopher in his ways. He just wasn't trying to be, just everything he said kind of had a philosophical tint to it. But they sold, the way that their little family made money was little baby alligator heads that they would sell at just in New Orleans little shops or whatever. Just people want to buy shellacked baby alligator heads to put on their keychain or whatever.
That's just perfect.
He didn't work very hard. He was kind of the schluff rapper, but his dad had all these alligator heads that we dip in the different solutions to make the the perfect shellacked alligator head, and he was sitting there once and he'd be like, "You'd be amazed how much you can get done in a day if you just sit and do it." It wasn't like this genius thing, but it was kind of smart. It's I'm sure he could get a lot of alligator heads done in a day if you just sit there and do alligator heads all day. You get probably a ton of alligator heads done in a day. And it kind of resonated with me. It's you can answer a lot of email in a day if you just sit there and do it,
I think I'm going to start using that as a metric, though. This is about 40 alligator heads worth of time.
Yeah. But that's the point, is that, don't just answer 2 and then go make a coffee or whatever. It's you can get a lot done if you just sit there and do it. Design anything else.
Good call.
Yeah. The question is actually a question that CJ had, but I'll ask it. I'll steal it here. Being in the Midwest, what are some resources that you have encountered, like conferences that are just really good and kind of exemplify kind of the culture of the Midwest and have helped you personally and in your career?
Okay, what are we listing?
Conferences, resources, meetups, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not. I for a while I went to a whole bunch of bar camps. Have you guys ever been to a bar camp? There was a really big one in Omaha, wasn't there? That people.
Yeah, I think there is one there.
Yeah, it's
Big Omaha or something.
Yeah, maybe it is that. Maybe because sometimes the idea of a bar camp is that it's a small homegrown kind of conference you don't pay for it. It's free. Everybody goes for free, and there's a big grid, and it represents the different rooms available and the different times. So at any given time, you can look across and be like, there's 5 different sessions going on, but they fill up the grid on the morning of the conference. You write your name at a chunk of the grid that says, I'm going to talk about this in this room. And it's like anything goes. So it's kind of techie, but some people do photography, like I've seen one, and it's fun every time you go to one because it's a mystery what you're going to get. I went and saw one where an old man was yelling about one of those wind generators in his backyard that he could see. He just chose that was his talk, was to be mad about that. But you'll see, so they're fun, and whoever runs them will put, a bunch of Cokes in a styrofoam cooler in the corner, and that's like the
Sure.
the refreshments for the day. But they all have their own kind of flair and fun to them. Sometimes they get really, really popular because they're free. They grow up to be bigger than a bar camp, and then I think that might be what Big Omaha grew up to be. Don't quote me on that. There's the one in Minneapolis that got so big that thousands of people go to it. It's not really a bar camp anymore. But I think those are really fun. I went to traveled to different cities to go to them because they I don't know, they have a good vibe to them. I think that kind of.
Yeah, we've really been drawn over the past couple of years to Circles Conference down in Dallas, and it's kind of because of the similar mentality with a different structure where it's just very personal. You get to meet a lot of people. It's very heavy on the interaction. You get a really long lunch break, stuff like that, and it's been a very kind of, I don't mean this in a campy way, but kind of a hometown conference where you go and you see people that you recognize from other places, but then it's not like like a South by or something where you're going, oh, look at the celebrities, and and thousands and thousands of people. They keep it pretty small, and it's just stuff like that has been. We're just like, we're always on the lookout for more of those because we know that they exist, but usually by nature they are also kind of hard to see because it's a small thing. It's a small town conference or something, and you'd never hear about it unless you're there, and then you go and whoa, this gold mine of things that we could do, and so we're always asking people who are from the area, especially someone who's been around like yourself, different things you've seen and ways that people can kind of plug in and feel like they're connected to the people around them.
Yeah, so conferences like that, certainly Converge SE is a really good one that's it's grown up over a bunch of years, and so it's in Columbia, South Carolina, and has a very good feel to it. I think of it as a little bit like a new South by Southwest, maybe not in scope, but there's different buildings that you go to, and it's in a really cool part of the town where there's music and stuff going on, and little cafes and restaurants and stuff. So there's a lot of people walking around and doing stuff. It has a cool vibe to the conference. I've never been to Arlton Lowry's one, but I hear Made by Few is a pretty good one like that.
Oh, I've heard of that one, yeah.
I'm pretty fond of the Front End Design Conference in St. Petersburg. That's the one going on that has a fun kind of local vibe to it. Blend Conf is another good one like that.
Very cool.
Nice. Well, it's kind of my job to be the big bad guy, but we like to keep these rather short and digestible. So I think we'll wrap up now. But thank you so much, Chris, for your time. This has been really fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Good to talk to some fellow Midwest boys.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And you can get to know Chris by hitting him up on Twitter at Chris Coyier, Coyier, or visiting some of the many projects that he does. He has csstricks.com, codepen.io, shoptalkshow.com, chriscoyier.net. I mean, I could probably go on and on, but we really appreciate it. Yeah, so those are the ones you really need to visit. And if you haven't, there's a wealth of information there, so make sure to check them out. And you can learn more about this show by visiting spiritofthemidwest.net. Thanks for tuning in. Please join us next time as we celebrate the spirit of the Midwest.